Bonjour French 1. The purpose of this video is to introduce your very first verb for the year, which is the verb avoir. But before I can do that, I need to make sure that you understand what a verb is and what it means to conjugate a verb. A verb is, of course, an action word or phrase in a sentence. It tells you what's happening. But what you don't realize is you conjugate that verb every day without thinking about it. So basically what verb conjugation is, it's the idea of changing a verb to make it match its subject. And in the French language, it usually means changing the ending. In the English language, you do this all the time, and you really don't even have to think about it. So for example, you say, I have a book, but if you change the word I to he, you also have to change your verb form, or conjugate the verb have, and you change it to he has a book. Basically, there's different forms of the verb to have in English, and you choose that form based on what the subject of your sentence is. Again, it'd be I have, but he has. And you do this pretty naturally in the English language and don't have to think about it, because basically you know that it's not correct if it sounds weird to you. The problem is in the French language, everything sounds weird to you at this point. So you have to work on memorizing your verb forms so that you don't end up saying the French equivalent of I has a book, which of course would sound very silly in English and equally silly in French. So that's why whenever you first learn a verb, I show you a verb chart such as this to show you all the possible forms of the verb. So go ahead and start writing it down on your paper. The verb avoir means to have. Now the thing you have to keep in mind is you can't just use the word news followed by the word avoir. You actually have to change avoir to make it match news. Because if you don't and you just say something like nous avoir une pizza, for we have a pizza, you're actually not saying we have a pizza. Avoir, when it looks like this, means to have. So if you just say nous avoir une pizza, you're saying we two have a pizza, which doesn't really make sense and sounds a little silly. In order to say we have a pizza, you have to change the word avoir to make it match news. Just like how you had to change I have to he has, you have to change it to nous avons to make it we have in the French language. So let's go ahead and walk through all of these forms. I'll pause after each one to give you a chance to pronounce it. If you want to say I have and do the je form of avoir, you have to say j'ai. If you want to say you have and do the tu form of avoir, you say tu as. If you want to say he has and do the il form of avoir, you say il a. If you want to say she has and do the elle form of avoir, you say elle a. If you want to say we have or one has and do the on form of avoir, you have to say on a. If you want to say we have and do the nous form of avoir, you have to say nous avons. If you want to say y'all have and do the vous form of avoir, you have to say vous avez. And if you want to say they have and do either the ils or elles form of avoir, you either have to say ils ont or elles ont. Probably the most popular way for my students to actually memorize this whole idea of the different forms of avoir is by using a video on YouTube. It's got a really cheesy song to it that's like one of those commercials that you'll see on TV where you just can't forget it. So without further ado, here's a quick clip of that video.
G-R-E-2-R-A-S, il a, elle a, nous avons, vous avez, il est, elle, O-N-T. G-R-E-2-R-A-S, il a, elle a, nous avons, vous avez, il est, elle, O-N-T. Le verbe avoir, si dynamique, le verbe si fort, c'est hypnotique. Il a imaginé, elle a rêvé, tu sais, je l'ai réalisé. G-R-E-2-R-A-S, il a, elle a, nous avons, vous avez, il est, elle, O-N-T. G-R-E-2-R-A-S, il a, elle a, nous avons, vous avez, il est, elle, O-N-T.
And at this point in time, we'll go ahead and pause that. Of course, you could watch the full video on your own, and you have the link there on your paper, and we will watch it several times in class to help you memorize it. But if you're somebody that sometimes get commercials stuck in your head, that can kind of be something where if you get that song stuck in your head, you also have your forms of avoir stuck in your head. So here's the thing, besides memorizing the forms of avoir, it's important that you actually be able to use them to create a sentence. So let's say that you want to say, I have a book, which we just did on the other page, right? If you want to say, I have a book in French, you need to think about what the word for I is, which you'll hopefully remember is the word je. Then you need to think about the verb for to have, which is avoir, but you can't just write je avoir because then you'd be saying I to have. You need to put the je or the I form of avoir, which you can tell from your chart is AI. So j'ai is how you say I have. And then if you remember from your notes from the last section, the words for a book is un livre, for a book. And that's how you create the complete sentence, I have a book. If you want to change that to he has a book, just like in English, you'll have to change the I to a he, and then you'll have to make sure that you change your form of avoir. Again, you can't just write avoir like this because then you'd be saying he to have a book, which is kind of silly. You have to use the he form of avoir, which you can tell from your chart is the letter a. Il a un livre would mean he has a book. Let's go ahead and take it a step further. What if you wanted to say y'all have, and then let's change it from a book to some books, just to get that plural noun practice in there as well. First things first, you have to know that the French word for y'all is vous. You have to know that that vous form of avoir, because we're not just going to say y'all to have and leave it as avoir. The vous form of avoir is avez. Don't forget that the indefinite article for some is the word de. And then the way you would say books is you take that word for book, which is livre, and you'd smack an S on the end, and you get vous avez des livres, for y'all have some books. Finally, another thing that sometimes confuses people is the idea of using something other than one of these subject pronouns. As in, what if we say the classroom has a door? La salle de classe is the word for a classroom. The problem is a lot of people see the word for classroom, and then they come up here to their chart and they say, I don't see the word classroom. How am I supposed to know what the form of avoir is? Think about a classroom, though, and the fact that a classroom is something that is feminine. It's a singular feminine item. Classroom is feminine. Again, remember, all people, places, things, and ideas have a gender in French. It happens to be feminine. Check your notes. It's on the feminine side of your notes. So it's actually a lot like she, because it's a singular feminine item. You're talking about how it happens to be a feminine it, has a door. So you're actually going to use the L form of avoir because it's a feminine it. It's a singular feminine item, which I know is very strange. If you want to say that it has a door, you'll have to tack on the words for a door, which is une porte. If that one confused you a little bit, don't worry. We'll talk more about it in class.